Hello, this is Sarah. Welcome back to Never Out of Books. Today I'm going to be filming little reviews that I do for the first half of January, and somehow I've already completed 13 things, which is absolutely ridiculous. But I guess that's probably because I was sick and my work schedule was all kinds of weird. Because there are 13 things, I'm going to try to review very quickly if I can, because I do not like very long videos. So without further ado, the first thing I completed this month was The Pearl short story by John Steinbeck. It's the first John Steinbeck that I've ever read. And my thoughts on this were, it was incredibly depressing. But I have to say that Steinbeck is amazing. He's an amazing writer, and I certainly hope that I read more by him, because despite the fact that I thought it was depressing, I really thought it was absolutely amazing. The next book that I completed was The Beauty of Darkness, which is the third in the Remnant Chronicles trilogy. And I don't want to spoil anything for you. A lot has gone on in this series. It has to be one of my favorite trilogies, though. I love the world. I love the main character. I love the love interest of the main character. I think it's all pretty fantastic. My only problem was that, and that was my own problem, is that it had been so long since I'd read the first two books that some of my enjoyment was sapped from not remembering what went on. So I highly recommend marathoning this series. I really feel like I should have reread the first two books before picking this one up. That being said, I loved it. So the next book that I read was Unmentionable, The Victorian Lady's Guide to Sex, Marriage, and Manners. It is a non-fiction, and this was very clever. This was told as if we were going back in time by a lady who is there telling us what it would all be like, because a lot of people romanticize, the past and how actually disgusting it was. That was pretty funny. It's very readable. It reads like a novel as opposed to, a boring, dry nonfiction book. So I highly recommend that if you need a little nonfiction in your life and, you like the Victorian era in any way, you would probably find this book very enjoyable. The next book that I finished is also the second book in a duology, and that is The Long Game by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. The first book in this is The Fixer, which I read, I want to say a year and a half ago, and really loved. It is a YA political thriller sort of novel, which I enjoy. The first book is about Tess, who ends up going to live with her sister, who she doesn't know is a fixer in Washington, D.C. Think Scandal, the TV show. She does that. And the people in her school, which of course all the politicians' children go to, expect her to fix everything like her sister does. And along the way, she ends up fixing a problem, but there is a larger story arc of her sister's story and how Tess gets drawn into her political intrigues and fixing. So very enjoyable. There is really no romance, so if you do not like romance in it, there is potential for it, but it is definitely not the main point of these books. So if you do not like any romance in your books and you want a YA, I would recommend these two. After that, I decided I wanted a little romance in my life after not having any. And I went to the next book in the Lucky Harbor series. This is Always on My Mind. And this one I particularly enjoyed. This is about Leah and Jack. He is a fireman, and I like fireman stories. And this is also a friends to love story, which is also one of the things that I really enjoy reading, maybe because it tends to be a bit more real life and how I kind of wish things would go on, that you're friends first and then you fall in love. So this had a couple of my favorite little romance tropes in it. It was cute and adorable, and now I'm almost done with this series. I'm over halfway done. Then I finished another series, a trilogy by Ellie Carter. This is the Embassy Row trilogy, and the last book is Take the Key and Lock Her Up. looks like this. My grandfather stole it, so I don't have it to show you. And this centers on a fictional country and the embassies that are on it. And in particular, Grace is our protagonist in this story. And when it comes to Ally Carter's writing, this is not her best series. I much prefer her other two series. In this one, Grace is very whiny overall. So this is definitely not the best of her work, although the whole princess story is kind of fun, and it wasn't not enjoyable. It's just that Grace is not a very fun person to read about, to be honest. This one did not rate as highly as the Gallagher Girls or the High Society for me, although it is still great fun. Then I finally got to my first Sarah J. Maas, and that is A Court of Thorns and Roses. This book, I don't even know what to say. I liked it, and at the same time, really couldn't give it a high rating, and I'm not entirely sure why. The world is incredibly complex and interesting. The fairies and all of that is incredibly interesting, and as a Beauty and the Beast retelling, it was incredibly clever, and I really, really, really enjoyed it. But there was something that held me back from giving it a very high rating, and I'm not really sure why. I do want to say that I agree with other reviewers of this book. This is really pushing the boundaries for the YA range in the sexuality aspect. It is incredibly sexual a book. One of the other things that I found difficult to read about because of my own personal feelings is that people don't say what they mean, and that's very hard. And I think she found that too, Feyre. You know, and not everything is how it seems, and so it tended to be a little bit confusing for me, and I don't know. I'm not entirely sure, but at the same time, I cannot wait to get to the next book. So it was definitely good enough that I am craving the next book. And I'm not cool with Tamlin, like I'm not interested in that. As soon as Rhys, or whatever his name is, came around, I was like, yes. Girl, why are you staying with that? That's no. No, it is all about Rhys, okay. I'm thinking yes, you should read this. But I'll be able to say more when I read the next book, because I hear that one's even better. Well, I think that Sarah J. Maas is definitely someone I should keep on my radar though, because again, the fairy world is incredibly interesting and complicated, and I kind of like that. Then I had a war with myself on whether to read the next book in A Court of Thorns and Roses or do something else, and I decided I probably should finish up with some of my challenges that I have going on. So I read Once Upon a Prince by Rachel Hawke. This is a romance novel, and I did not realize it was a Christian romance, which is not my thing. I find them very preachy and not fun. So this was kind of a bummer for me, to be honest. This came in one of my book boxes that I got last year, and the sequel to it also came. So I will of course read them. Yeah, it's just that it's not my thing. Then I learned my lesson, and I decided that I needed to reread the first book in this series before I read the second book that has been on my TBR for a while. And that was The Conspiracy of Us. And I enjoyed this thoroughly the second time around, just as much as the first. This focuses on Avery and her finding out that she is a family to the circle, and they basically run the whole world. And so this is like a jet-setting adventure to find things and to keep her and figure things out, and yeah, it's very good. It was enjoyable. And so the second book in it is Map of Fates. And this series then took a turn that I was not expecting. And that makes me highly anticipate the third book, because suddenly we have very different elements than just an adventure novel going on. We have a little bit of science fiction-y sort of nonsense going on, and I do not want to say any more. So I enjoy these books. They are great fun. They are quick reads. And everything, these two wrap up very nicely with the original plot that's going on in the first book, but it opens up all kinds of new stuff for the next book. So I think it comes out in June, so now I have to wait until June. Then I read a book on my Kindle, Just This Once by Rosalind James. It has you can't see it. You can see there's flip-flops in the sand. And this is the first book in Escape to New Zealand series. These are also romance books, but this is the first time that I've ever read a book about New Zealand or set in New Zealand. So it was incredibly interesting in that respect. And the writer wrote this with a lot of information, a lot of dumping, she spent a couple of years, I believe, in New Zealand. So there was a lot of interesting facts about New Zealand in it, but it was not really formatted very well. It was like, and now we're going to have a paragraph about New Zealand, and now we're in love. And now we're gonna have a paragraph about New Zealand, and now we're so in love. So I didn't really like the book, which is a shame. I don't think I will be continuing with this series, but it was kind of nice to learn a little bit about New Zealand, and there's a map in it, and it was interesting in that respect, but the actual story about the rugby player and the highly stressed workaholic from America was not really interesting. As a matter of fact, I've forgotten mostly about it already. Then, because I'm not really having a very good time reading romance lately, I decided to try again and read one on my Nook that is dying. I have to really keep it plugged in to actually read on it, so I have to finish the books that are on it pretty soon. And this is The Virtuoso by Grace Burrows. This is the third book in the Wyndham series, which is one of the series that I'm trying to complete, at least the books that I own this year. So this is about Val and Ellen. He is a virtuoso. He's a musical, which is very interesting in these romance novels. You do not see a lot of that. And then you have Ellen, who is a widow living in a small little cottage, and he wins this estate where she's living on, and all kinds of shenanigans ensue. Now, I knew exactly where this was going from the moment that it started. You know, even the mystery part of it was not really a mystery. And this is one of those romances that's very slow and steady, and I like that sometimes, but as you can see, I've been reading a lot of quick books, and this just didn't sit right with me at the time. Again, I own some of the books already, so I'm going to continue the series, but this wasn't Grace Burrows' best work, I don't think. The last thing that I finished was actually an audiobook, Stiff by Mary Roach. It's actually Stiff, The Curious Lives of Human Cadavers. And I have read 2 other Mary Roach books, which I very much enjoyed, and this is my least favorite. I'm a nurse, so, you know, the whole thought of cadavers, like, that doesn't gross me out at all. But maybe it's because I'm a nurse that I was expecting this book to be a little bit more tongue-in-cheek like her others are, and this was written a bit more respectfully and dignified, which actually kind of saddened me, because a lot of Mary Roach's wonder is the tongue-in-cheek manner in which she writes. I know a lot of people start here. If you did start here and you don't like her, I would definitely recommend going for Packing for Mars first and try her again, or just go to Packing for Mars, because I think that is the best of the 3 that I have read so far. And if you can get through the first 2 chapters, it's not as gross after that. That's all I'm saying. So I hope everyone is enjoying, and I will talk to you all later. Bye!